Do you remember what it feels like to watch all those raunchy PG-13 or R-rated TV shows and movies about high school where there's always that mean clique, usually 3 girls who just take it out to bully anybody in their way because they're less pretty, less popular than them, or even the new character who everyone hates and makes fun of. There's always the geeky group and the group of people who are super popular and dumb, the famously talented and most popular football or basketball players, the weirdos, usually the theater kids in their department, or the cheerleaders who just have the most wild experiences in the entire show. And just think, wow, I cannot wait for high school to just begin. My life is going to be so fun and interesting, and every day is going to be a new experience in high school. And then when you finally got there, it sucked.
I've never had one before.
You've never had a sleepover?
No, I haven't. I'm not sure what to do next.
Don't worry, we know how to make a sleepover a total success. Let's go, girls!
It was the complete opposite. It was boring. People were more concerned about their grades than the newest couple who've been dating for 2 weeks before breaking up. The teachers were not these slick characters with even slicker comments at their students, and the mean girl group didn't even exist. In fact, you can even consider some people popular. They weren't so popular that everybody wanted to be them or at least be friends or associated with them, but popular enough that everyone seemed to more or less know who they were. The parties weren't complete ragers if you even got invited to one to begin with. Nobody really cared that much for cheerleaders, and depending on what school you went to, the pep rallies were either really good or really trash. And specifically, and even more, the most surprising difference between the popular kids in the movies and in the TV shows is that the popular kids in real life would be the ones who constantly talk during the class, but also would balance their social lives with their education. Now, when we all went to high school and saw the difference between high school in the movies and high schools in reality, we all thought, wow, this sucks, this is kind of boring, and I wish it was like a movie. But we all imagined it would stop there. Maybe college would be even more like the TV shows and movies, having constant ragers and parties, always going out, always having a sense of responsibility, and being the adult that you wanted to be in your childhood but never had the resources to do so. And yeah, you know, college got a little bit closer to the movie experience, but then you make it into your 20s and you know that this is complete and utter freedom. No more classes, no more worrying about homework, but then there's after you graduate college and you're now in your 20s, you know, it's finally time to worry about yourself and the world that you're gonna create. No more worrying about homework or budgeting your money so that you have enough snacks in your dorm to make it through the week. Make your mark on this world and really make it your own. Go out and explore everything the world has to offer. Travel relentlessly and hang out with your group of friends every day just because you feel like it. Well, that is the biggest disappointment that television has taught me. You see, there's this thing in Hollywood where they glamorize the experience of different age groups and make you feel like you're gonna have the most amazing time of your life and really live it up. We all thought that high school was a fluke and that they just made that up, but living in your 20s is no ball of sunshine as well. In fact, modern day speaking, I feel like most millennials and Gen Z are more concerned about making rent and paying bills on time rather than actually going out and carelessly spending all your time at a coffee shop or at a bar and having the most wild adventures of your life. These shows tend to do more damage than help onto my psyche because I'm one of those people who love to live life to the fullest, especially if it feels like some sort of movie or TV show. And seeing how life has never actually fully reached those potentials as far as episode to episode of shows I like, kind of disappointing some of the time. I mean, what is up with Hollywood glamorizing things so much that it makes us so excited for reality, and when we get there, it never fully connects. It never really happens. I think of these shows where 20-somethings will have amazing careers straight out of college, the amazingly large apartments, or even apartments that we would consider as married adults to be in the mediocre level, except these young 20-somethings tend to have them straight out of college with this fascinatingly big square footage, while they're all single, maybe sharing the apartment rent with a roommate or two. And what's even worse than all of these things is that their biggest problems seem to be very far away from the biggest problems we face in reality. I mean, what is up with that? How do they constantly have the money and the time to hang out with each other every night, drinking at a bar or eating at a coffee shop, going out and having these grand adventures where they're constantly traveling to and meeting new people and having these fun experiences, or even having the time to have a social life to begin with? Yeah. And so in this episode, I really wanted to sort of explore more, so rant and talk about the world of TV 20-somethings and how overestimated the reality of 20-somethings in reality. My name is Mia, your host of Mia's Slumber Party, and let's go ahead and jump into this video. Okay, so 20-somethings typically living in a big city of either New York or LA, having these mundane jobs, or even if these jobs can happen to pay way more than the typical minimum wage, they still find a way to afford these ginormous apartments. And again, fresh out of college. Essentially, when you're in your 20s, you're sort of like a toddler phase of being an adult. Being 18 to 23 in colleges, but definitely the stages of where you're walking on your own for the first time. Maybe you might have a little bit of help if you fall, but for the most part, you're out there living your life. These 20-somethings are always having these massive square apartments. For instance, the show Friends. So I've looked up the Friends apartment. The Friends apartment is about 1,500 square feet long. Google also states that the Friends apartment is well over the average size apartment, which is 1,100 square feet. Now, looking up apartments in New York City, I see that the typical apartment goes around $3,800. Somehow, what we see is that for the main part of the Friends show, the women who occupy this apartment and are paying rent are Monica and Rachel. At the very beginning of the show, it's actually just Monica, and she invites Rachel to live with her because she finds herself houseless, jobless, and completely alone. So when Monica has this ginormous apartment that she's paying for by herself as a professional chef, it's kind of like unbelievable that she's able to pay for this apartment. I mean, we don't even see her struggle in the series to get her bills paid on time. That's just not the main concern. As well as this apartment tends to house everybody, it is often their place of hangout with the friend group aside from the coffee shop. So whenever they're not at the coffee shop, they're at her house. And when Rachel does actually start living there and paying rent, she is a waitress who it is made fun of that she doesn't make a lot of money. So how are they affording this rent? Fresh out of their 20s? We don't know. Another great example is How I Met Your Mother. They have an amazing apartment as well. Maybe similar, if not a little bit less space than Friends. However, they still have their 2-bedroom apartment with 1 bathroom, a full kitchen, a full living room, and a deck on top of their apartment. So a full balcony that is essentially the same size as the apartment itself. And now How I Met Your Mother's bar was famously built off of another bar that's located on Broadway Street in New York City. If it's not on Broadway, it might actually be very close to Broadway. I'll double check when editing this. But their apartment is right on top of that bar. And so this is a very public space that is downtown in New York. So you already know the rent alone is going to be extremely expensive. As well as, like I said earlier, they have that huge balcony, roughly the same size as the actual apartment itself. At the very beginning of the series, who lives in this apartment is Ted and Marshall. Lily pretty much lives there, but she doesn't pay rent because she pays for her own apartment in another part of New York that she doesn't spend time in. It actually turned into a Chinese restaurant without her even realizing. It is a pretty massive apartment for just her on her own as a kindergarten teacher. So all those things are crazy, but for the careers of the people who are actually paying rent, you have Marshall, who's still a law student. He's still in college trying to get into the grad program, and as far as I know, he doesn't really have like a firm job or firm career that he works at. Ted has managed to become a architect at a prestigious law firm of an architect who was basically a one-hit wonder of the architecture world. Even though they're portrayed as broke, have time to constantly spend at the bar under them every night with their friends and hang out and still pay rent on time. Again, never a concern of how are we going to be able to afford this. On the opposite side of America, we have the friend group from New Girl, who is 4 people. 3 of the 4 do not have the best paying jobs, and yet they're still able to afford their massive loft in downtown LA somehow. These are all crazy things. And living single, we have Khadijah, who owns her own magazine company, always being made fun of for being broke, both her and the company, and any money she gets she spends on pretty much putting it towards the magazine company. Her cousin Sinclair, who works for Khadijah as her assistant at the magazine, so that's not paying well. And that's also another joke in the show, is that nobody's getting paid at Flavor magazine. Then we have Regine, who works at a boutique, who I don't know exactly how much boutiques cost. I know that retail jobs aren't making as much money as her retail job is higher than fast fashion, so not your Forever 21 or your H&M, but it's lower than couture, so not a Gucci or Louis Vuitton store. Probably something a little bit lower in that range in the middle. They constantly host parties, constantly are having their friends come over, eat their food in their house, and basically live there. And so those 3 women are providing for their whole village of friends. Similar to Living Single, there is another black sitcom that also has a similar dynamic of friendship called Girlfriends. And in it, there's Joan. So in Girlfriends, there's Joan, who's almost 30, just made partner in her law firm. She has her own 2-bedroom house, and she constantly is throwing parties and having all of her friends hang out there as well at her house. She's a very established 20-something-year-old. As well as her friend Tony, who's a real estate agent, has a very nice apartment. There's also Maya and Lynn, who aren't in the most established spot. Maya is a 20-something who somewhat has her life together. Her job is she's an assistant of Joan, which isn't making a lot of money. She's able to afford her house with her husband and still raise her son. And then there's Lynn, who's a complete wild card, who bounces from job to job and easily gets fired, has no direction for life or any source of real income. The world of these 20-somethings being able to just afford the world, afford to constantly go out and eat and do everything, but we barely, if ever, see them go to work, is quite weird. Most of these shows tend to have the main characters focus on parts of their life where they're either going out to an event or hanging out with their friends. I find more so in the 90s than modern day. We don't get to see them as much go to work, but sometimes they do, unless the show is centered around the job, like say for The Office or Parks or Rec or anything like that. Like those shows are specifically about their careers. These other types of sitcoms where it focuses on the community that these friends have, living up life as a 20-something and finding yourself and finding love. It is very hard as an audience member to take yourself out of the context of that world to then realize, hey, this isn't very realistic. And not saying that all shows and movies need to be realistic. Recently, I watched the movie Bottoms, which is completely unrealistic and lives in its own world. I love spoof things like that. They're not serious on purpose. But in shows like these where they do have those serious moments that want you to take life lessons in, want you to grasp onto the lessons and things that they learn in their 20s, it's very hard to watch those shows and think, yeah, that's what I'm going to be when I'm in my 20-somethings. And then when life doesn't go your way or doesn't make it to where you have those things, you can feel a sense of, well, what's wrong? What am I doing wrong? What is going on? And how can I change my life so much that I embody those attributes? I think for me, one thing that I really was struggling with was just seeing where I am and how I wasn't having that career. For me, I had to take a pause from college for my mental health, and I moved back in with my mom. And so for me, just seeing them in their lives, having these prestigious careers and their full spaces, houses or major apartments, and thinking it was gonna be like that for me, hanging out with my friends constantly every day and laughing. For me, just seeing how different life is compared to those shows set in a precedent for me that everything was going to be easy, in the sense of that was almost a guarantee. Like for me watching these shows, I thought it would be kind of rare for it not to go this way, for me not to have my life fully set up and discovered by the time I'm in my 20s and living life like this out of college. So there's a video by Amanda Mariana in which she talks about the importance of having a third space. A thing about these movies and TV shows is that they typically do have that third space and the importance of them. Now, a third space is a place that's essential for you to sort of relax and unwind throughout the week so that you can recharge. A place where you can be you and feel comfortable. And a first space most people would consider is the space where you live. You wake up, you go to sleep, you eat, usually connected to that space of essential needs that you have, essential thoughts that you think about, like rent. A second place is more in tune with another space you go often, where you support your life in one way or another. So you go to your second space so that you can finance those things. That would be a job. The third space is a stress-free environment in which you go to recharge, to be yourself. Some people like quiet and rare coffee places, or a park, somewhere that allows you to just chill or even spark up new ideas. These are essential to your adulthood, and these are things that are all very well frequently showed in these types of shows. Specifically sitcoms. You need a place where all the characters can come together. For me, I think of How I Met Your Mother, one of my favorite TV show, in which for How I Met Your Mother, third place is the bar. And so they're frequent at the bar, everybody literally knows their name as if it was Cheers. And they're regulars, They're always in there drinking a scotch or a beer and having the time of their lives. A big thing about How I Met Your Mother is that it centers on building these sort of adventures with your friends. It could be a crazy night, or it could be a memorable life lesson night. And so How I Met Your Mother has many times where they either will give you life lessons in the show to keep, which are actually really good to learn, or it will go completely crazy bananas and have these wild adventures, mostly centered around the character Barney. And so for me, watching these shows growing up, I think of them now as, oh, when I'm in my 20s, I'm gonna go to a bar and have my friends. I'm gonna go to a bar every day with my friends, and we're gonna have crazy adventures to remember. And so now that I spend most of my days doing nothing except for going to work, coming home, and watching YouTube, I see how very different and very disconnected from reality these shows are. Of course, you can go do your thing, but most of the time people aren't going out with their friend group every single night. You have the people who connect with each other and go out every once in a while after planning a night, and then you have the friend group that maybe they see each other once a week, but typically most of the time people aren't going every night to a specific place to hang out with their friends. There's also shows in which, my voice just completely changed, there's also shows in which these 20-somethings have these big elaborate lives that allow them to go out and travel frequently. I think of Emily in Paris. Now, I'm gonna be transparent. I've never seen Emily in Paris, nor do I really have a interest to, but sometimes I'll watch other people react or do commentary videos or whatever, video essays on shows that I have no interest in, because some people talk about those shows and find them interesting, and I'm just interested in hearing what they think about them instead of actually watching it. Emily in Paris is one of those shows, and I've seen a lot of videos that talks about how bad it treats its non-main character, how Emily is a bad character that a lot of people don't like, and how she gets away with a lot of things. Like, literally, she is a 20-something who gets a prestigious job that allows her to travel to Paris to live, fully paid for by her job, and she doesn't know a lick of French, but is still able to get around and have these great experiences and meet these fantastic people. These things are just so unbelievably unrealistic, and like the fact I said earlier, our mindsets are, especially now, especially with Gen Z and just the mental health problems we have, most of the time we're stressed out because we have to worry about realistic things like money, paying for bills, and all these things like that. And so a lot of the time, I think realistically, you're in your 20-somethings, your mind is get a job, get somewhere to live, and then pay for food. Don't spend all your money on food, and focus on your day-to-day responsibilities. That's what happens a lot, and these shows set a precedent that this is the reality, that once you're in your 20s, you're going to be living life to the fullest and completely unstoppable. Then there's shows that are all about 20-somethings living out their lives in the dating world. Shows like Younger, who is literally, aside from the main character who's in her 40s, the other characters are all about living up and constantly going on dates. But the biggest one that comes to mind to me is Sex and the City. Sex and the City, all about 20-somethings are constantly going out on dates with men, or just hooking up with men, living out their lives and finding out the different types of roles as far as women's sexuality. Big thing, especially in these earlier shows, very much had women who were always hooking up with these guys, always going on dates, and then ends with them getting married in their 20s or in their almost 30s. Or modern day speaking, a lot of these shows kind of change the script, in which the characters aren't so much concerned about getting married as the end goal, but are more concerned about just finding a love match, in a sense, having that relationship that will last the distance, not necessarily worried about marriage. I think that's a good flip as far as modern day speaking, because back in the days, we know that everybody used to get married by the age of 25, or their parents would heavily push them and call them spinsters if they weren't married by then. Nowadays, we can totally see women who aren't getting married at this age, and I love to see that. But in TV shows, it was always a must, a requirement, that these people are getting out of college, heading to the big city, specifically for two things. They want to immediately excel in their careers and to immediately get married and have children. And so these are things that these shows can definitely enforce on different people, especially in my generation, and that mindset. I think there was like a TikTok trend in which was showing your parents at your age versus you at your age. And I think that TikTok trend really caps on what the modern day reality is of being in your 20s versus, being in your 20s 10, 15, 20 years ago, and not needing to have all your life figured out, but instead just having the parts that make you figured out and focusing on what makes you happy. And so it'll be like my parents when they were 25 and they're getting married or starting a family, and then it'll be like me at 25 and they'll be having a Shrek themed birthday party. I think it's so hilarious because your life begins, but then also that's where you finally get on your way of reaching the highest goals of life, which would have been considered marriage, and that's it, starting your life slowing down. Whereas in reality nowadays, for majority of us, 20s are no longer a time of living this wild life and having new adventures every day. It's no longer that time where you get to know yourself right before you turn 30 and your life ends because you're getting married and having kids, which all of those things are fine if that's what you want. But nowadays, your 20s are just times where you get to just be you, where you can go out and party if you want to, but most of the time we're staying indoors, putting on a good movie, and going to bed right after. It doesn't have to be this grand and exciting thing that Hollywood has made it out to be, but the reality can also be fun and entertaining in itself, even though if it is completely separate than the expectations that Hollywood has put out of having these elaborate drunken nights of freedom away from your job and all your careers, but hanging out with your friends all the time. And I think that's kind of beautiful. I think it's fun. We have now seen that it is okay for us to take more time to settle into life and our careers, finding things that make us tick instead of having to have our whole lives figured out as soon as we graduate college, if we even decide to go to college. I think I'd like to see more of shows like that in Hollywood. There are shows like Two Broke Girls or Broad City that capitulate on women who are in their 20s, still living in big cities, who don't have their lives put together, who don't have the grand job, but are still going out and having fun. Instead of in those shows where a huge part of it is also depending on the character saying, hey, this isn't what I want out of life. How about some more shows where people are just content with where they are in life, that they don't have it fully figured out and they're not exactly where they want to be, or maybe don't even know where they want to be, but still are living life to the fullest in whatever way they imagine that to be. Whether it's rewatching Disney Channel original shows on Disney Plus, or if it's going to the grocery store and picking out that one expensive item and getting excited about it because it's out of the mundane for you. I think I've learned to feel more at ease and comfortable with the fact that I don't have everything figured out in life, no matter how much I plan it or how much I try to have these unbelievable goals for myself to reach, and learning to be more okay if I don't succeed at everything by the age of 25, but instead trying to learn to be okay if I don't succeed in a certain area by the time I want, to not consider that as a failure, but to just give myself more grace and give myself more time at where I want to be at. This was my rant on 20-somethings in TV shows, and yeah, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Don't forget to leave a like and comment your favorite 20-something TV show. I know mine is How I Met Your Mother, but let me know what your favorite TV shows about 20-somethings are. And if you thought it handled the whole 20-somethings era well or not. This is Mia from Mia's Slumber Party, and good night.